Right, it's been a couple of days because I've been a little bit unwell, and you might be able to hear it in my voice, but hopefully we'll just crack on and yeah. So please bear with me today. I need to get this. I need to get this filmed, and I need to get this sort of out. It's Sunday, and we are 2 weeks before Christmas, so I really do need to sort of try and get it together and get the rest of this done, because I've been wanting to come back to drawing for a few days, but I've just felt quite rough. So I'll see how I go today. I'll see how much we can get done. My aim is to have it finished, but we'll see. I'm gonna just go easy. It's just not easy, obviously, when my throat's really sore and I'm quite bunged up to talk. It would be fine if I didn't have to do the teaching side of it. If I could just draw, then yeah, that'd be great. So any coughing or anything like excuse me, just like that, I do apologise. I'll try and edit as much as I can out. Starting off with some of the sepia 50%. Just down for this dark shadow. It's sort of like got a little bit of like this purplyish tone. And I'm also just going to put in some of the light flash. Oh, I had a bit of like residue or something left on my pencil, but it's fine because we're going over this with quite a dark colour. So I'm just going to take it to about here. I'm focusing on just sort of keeping it in the middle a little bit. And I'm not afraid to go lightly towards where that sepia is, because we've got this sort of real dark transition. It's kind of a little bit reddy tone, so I'm probably just going to take a little bit of the light pressure and some of the cinnamon, and I'm just going to start dragging a little bit of that colour towards the light flash. Removing any of that excess from the graphite, and then just running this light flash nice and smoothly over the top. And I'm also, so that's going to be my first layer, and then I'm gently and lightly going to go in with my burnt ochre. Again, there's not an awful lot of detail in here, so we're just going to try and draw in any shapes and just focus mostly on getting the contrast right. So, and then taking a little bit more of that cinnamon and just building up lightly and gently another layer. As I said, there's not an awful lot of detail in here, so we're just trying to draw in some of the shapes we can see. And then gonna remove lightly that graphite line along there. And then some of that light flash. And then again, another layer, we're going to start going in with a bit of the burnt sienna, just focusing it on this real dark area as we go towards that sepia 50% that we put in for the luminance initially. And following exactly the same protocol, so we're just focusing on the shapes that we can see. And lastly, going to use the darkest sepia from the luminance, because this is technically just like a really dark brown. The dark sepia from the polychromos is a little bit more of like a blacky kind of tone, so I think this, and plus the luminance pencils are quite a lot softer, so this is quite a nice sort of transition. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the burnt sienna again. And then lastly, one more layer of the sepia, and I'm just working this towards the body of the bird. And then again, just taking some more of that burnt sienna. And then lastly, we could probably use a little bit of the Payne's Grey from the polychromos. Now the reason why, you might be thinking, well, that's the cool tone, why would you go in with the Payne's Grey? And the reason is if you look at the colour wheel, the colours complement each other so much because they're opposite sides, so we're hyping up that contrast. Blue and orange, the reason why the spider is so striking is because they're on opposite sides of the colour wheel. So as soon as we add a little bit of like a blue tone, it will just add so much more depth to this orange. That's my theory anyway. And again, just adding one more layer just to help blend everything in with some of the burnt ochre and burnt sienna. I'm also going to just take a little bit of the Payne's Grey 30%, just gently at the bottom of the tail, just blending that a little bit into where the orangey sort of tone is. And then I'm going to take the sepia 50, just running that along that edge where we've got to put that orange tone in, because this is quite a dark area. I'm also just in that super dark area at the bottom there, that's where I'm going to just put through the centre some of the darkest sepia. And I'm also just going to blend a little bit of the Payne's Grey 30 again, just because there is a sort of like a slight bluey kind of tone, so I feel like if I just add this little layer of Payne's Grey 30, again, just I'm not sort of scrubbing it in, I'm just putting little pencil strokes just over almost like the edge, and then going over the top with a little bit of the sepia 50. I'm also just going to take a bit of the burnt sienna just over that light area, because there's no sort of light line in between those two areas, so I'm just going to just darken up that transition a little bit. And then I'm going to take the Payne's Grey from the Polychromos over this edge here. And then some of that dark sepia. And then I'm just going to blend that edge out because it looks like it's slightly out of focus. And I'm going to do that just by taking a little bit of this Luminance Payne's Grey 30 and just gently just blending out that edge. So using a light pressure and just almost just going over the edge, smoothing it down. Just very, very gently. And then we could add just a little bit of the black just over any of those darker areas again. And I'm also going to take a little bit of the Mars Black from the Light Fast range and just put that in as well to help darken everything down a little bit more. And there we have pretty much adding a couple more layers just to darken up the tail with a bit more of the burnt sienna. Okay, so these feet are a little bit challenging. I always find feet challenging, so we're just going to take it nice and slowly. I'm going to start off by adding a little bit of the light flesh. And I think the key to this is just by adding lots of small, slight layers and not overthinking it too much, which is, for me, easier said than done. So I've added a real like pressure of some of that light flesh, and now I'm just going to go in with this is the orange glaze from the Polychromos, and I'm just going to lightly just work this into just some of those sort of more orangey toned areas. And if I want it to be a little bit darker still, that's when I'm going to go in with a little bit of the terracotta from the Luminance, which is a colour I actually don't think I've used before. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's what I keep kind of having to remind myself, that, you know, this is a drawing. So I'm using any of those lighter areas where it's got a sort of more peachy yellowy tone. That's when I'm adding a little bit of the light flesh first. Removing the graphite on those lighter areas. And just really adding a little bit of pressure here and there. And then again, just glazing, using this orange glaze, just lightly over the top. And then for those sort of more darker areas, I think I'm going to use a little bit of this cinnamon again. Just want to give the illusion of that there's, you know, these little claws. And I think one of the key things, because obviously that looks a bit like, well, what's going on there, in my opinion. But I think one of the key things to kind of try and do is by really sort of adding in those little nuance, like those little details. Obviously, once we put the darkness underneath on the branch, it will make a difference as well. But yeah, just trying to just add a couple of sort of darker areas. So again, just going backwards and forwards, and I can just add a little bit more of the light flash just into those more yellowy areas. And I think what will really start to help is if we start to add a little bit of depth underneath. So I'm going to initially just start off by adding a little bit of the sepia 50%, very, very gently. Just around. And then, so we're going to mix a bit of the sepia 50 with some of the sepia 10%. And we can just start to layer up. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just looking for where there's some sort of darker shapes, and in any of areas where it's got those darker shapes, I'm just sort of just drawing in some of those patterns that I can see, leaving any of the lighter areas obviously a bit lighter because we can use a different sort of shade for that, and we can obviously darken up as we go as well. Zoom you in a little bit more. But I'm going to just take the darkest sepia and really try and emphasise a little bit of this depth. And then blending it out with some of the sepia 10%. Makes it a little bit lighter. And then, again, a little bit of that orange glaze. We're just going to work this into some of those brighter areas that we can see. And then when it's got a bit more of that reddy tone, that's when we're going to use the terracotta. And then again, just sharpening up any of those darker details with a little bit of the burnt sienna. I'm gonna also just take a little bit of the Payne's Grey. So there's a slightly bluey tone on this branch. So again, just gonna lightly just go over some of those darker areas with a little bit of this Payne's Grey gently, and then blending out with some of the sepia. I find drawing sort of wood and anything like this super therapeutic because there's no structure to it. You know, you can just draw it as kind of you see it, and you can just use quite a lot of different layers. Like I can take a little bit of the cold grey one from the polychromos and just smooth down any of these sort of more lumpy, or more, you know, there's some lumpy areas and there's a little bit of like some flatter areas, so we can just like push everything down a little bit with the polychromos, and then obviously just go in and layer it up again with, you know, starting off with a little bit of the sepia 10%, focusing it on the shapes and the direction of the wood that we can see in the reference photo. And then because we've put that layer of cold grey down, it will just allow us to kind of keep quite a lot of lightness going through here, which is really lovely. And it just helps smooth everything down so the wood looks like it is sort of really smooth. I'm using cold grey because obviously there's a lot of light on the top part of this branch, and it's quite a lot of cool light, so which means sort of like purples and blues, and the sepia is always, as I've said so many times, the sepia is sort of like from the luminance is sort of a little bit more of that purpley tone. So yeah, we can just go in and put a little bit of detail in, and then just slowly start to layer it up and focus more on adding, you know, a few shapes here and there, and I promise you it just sort of comes together and it starts to look like a branch, and it happens really quite fast. We can just, you know, build everything up. And if we wanted a little bit more of that sort of bluey tone, then we can just go in with a little bit of the luminance. Here, 30% to begin with. Only just putting in a small amount here and there, just to layer it up. And obviously there's a lot of depth we could go in here. This is just the initial layers to begin with. Again, always just following the shapes that we can see in the reference photo. Okay, so I'm having to pause quite a bit because I feel quite, it sounds ridiculous, but I feel quite out of breath when I have to talk for quite a long period of time. I've taken some like cold and flu tablets, and so hopefully we'll be alright. But yeah, I do apologise for being quite nasally and raspy and just a bit all over the place at the moment. It's not obviously how I like to do things at all, but it's I've got a couple more Christmassy sort of work bits to do over the next couple of days, and then I'm technically off for Christmas. You know, I haven't got any real deadlines that I need to adhere to until the new year, but I think I'll be doing a little festive not workshop, but a little festive masterclass, little freebie one for us all to work on over Christmas. I'm just trying to choose a subject at the moment. It might be like something like a ball or something like that. I don't know. I need to find get some ideas. But I've had a lot of requests for masterclass subjects for the new year. And they're going to be sort of like, there's going to be full length ones, there's going to be some more focus ones. So yeah, there's a lot coming. There's a lot of sort of like, and as I've always said with these classes, the aim is to teach you something new with every single one that I release. Hence why, you know, I change the paper and we sort of work on different subjects and different colours and different patterns and different techniques a lot. I never like to try and do the same thing twice. So yeah, there is a lot of people who have been asking for canine masterclasses and some more birds, some wildlife. I've got a really exciting one planned, and then yeah, lots of focus ones. The list is endless when it comes to workshops and masterclasses and things like that. So yeah, I'm excited, really excited for the new year and what sort of we can bring to the table with all of these classes. So just worked a little bit of the sepia 10 in. Now I'm just going to take the sepia 50. And again, just following the same protocol, so just noticing where on the paper it gets a little bit darker, and just trying to draw in some of those shapes. And I'm also just going to use a little bit of Cold Grey 5 to start sort of getting a little bit more of that darker detail in without going in with a paint grey, because that sometimes can look a little bit too bluey kind of tone, whereas this is a slightly more neutral colour. And then we've got adding some of the darkest sepia in. Obviously this isn't the darkest colour we can go in with, but this is a real dark kind of purpley brown. I just like to go over some of those darker areas with this colour, focusing on beginning to add that contrast. You can also just take a little bit of the burnt sienna and just make sure that we haven't got any sort of light areas in between, because there's quite a lot of shadow down here, so we really want to work on getting the shadow in. And we can just work on smoothing out some of that texture as well. So once we've sort of got a smooth layer in, then we can start to add, again, just a little bit more detail. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of the Payne's Grey from the Polychromos, and I'm also going to take some of the dark sepia from the Polychromos too. I'm going to give them both a sharpen, starting off with the dark sepia. And then I'm going to just begin to gently and lightly come over the top of where I've put that darker, that darker sepia from the luminance, and I'm just gonna draw in some of that darkest shadow. And then we're going to just begin to add a little bit of the sepia 50, again, to those sort of mid-tone areas. I'm always working sort of backwards and forwards, just to create a smooth effect. And then we are going to take just a little bit of the cold grey 1, and just smoothing out that top section. It looks like it is sort of slightly, it's not out of focus, and I'm not afraid to come over the top and use this colour to smooth out and lighten up some of that mid-tone. So again, we can just go over it again with some of that darkest detail that we can see in the reference photo. And then again, just smoothing out some of these layers. It's beginning to look a little bit like a branch now, I think. And then I'm gonna come down and work sort of to the left almost. Okay, so I'm gonna remove, especially at the top here, remove some of this graphite. Just lightly. I want to still be able to see where it was drawn in. And then I'm gonna take my coal grey one. And any of those cool light areas, that's when where I'm gonna be using this cold grey. And then any of those sort of more beigey areas, that's when I'm gonna use some of the warm grey. So taking warm grey 1 initially, and I'm also going to go over that with some of the raw umber, I think. So using warm grey 1 and raw umber. Smoothing everything, although any area through the middle that's a little bit lighter, that's when I'm just going to use the warm grey 1. And then just blending. It doesn't, there's no sort of real, you must do this for it to look realistic with wood, because it's that's the beauty, because it's so uneven and it doesn't look like it's so unperfect that you can kind of just get away with putting, you know, quite a lot of, or almost throw in the kitchen sink at it and it will look still decent. And that's what I really enjoy drawing stuff like this, because yeah, it's very, very forgiving with what sort of you can get away with putting in, which makes it really, really enjoyable for me to draw. I'm just looking for, oh, there it is. I'm going to add a little bit of the buff titanium just through the centre of that lighter area. It's a bit yellowy, but I think it will work. And then I'm just taking a little bit more of the warm grey 1. And just again, because I'm just going to bring it down, so I know we're going towards the edge of the camera here, but just going to bring it down a little bit through there. Just so, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, because I will just put it into this part into a mount, so it will be covered up, but just for the purposes of, because I would want this to sit slightly lower than the tail. So again, just focusing on adding just a little bit of that detail, well, that colour to the base. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, it can kind of just blend out a little bit. So I'm going to take the sepia 50% and just working this into any of those darker areas. Again, I mean, I am sort of following the detail and direction of the detail that I can see in the reference photo, but it doesn't have to be, you know, perfect. As I said, these sort of branches are so imperfectly perfect that we can just kind of get away with putting quite a lot of different colours down, and it works. I think I'm going to take a little bit of the beige from the Pablos, just to add a little bit of like a brown, more browny tone. There's a little bit of sort of like, I don't know, maybe some burnt umber, but I think I want to kind of get the most part of the darker areas in first. So using like the sepia, staying consistent with the colours I'm using throughout the branch, and then if I need to sort of tone and tweak, then I can go in with some sort of more hidden colours. But I don't really ever like adding them too early, because I don't want it to throw off the consistency of what I've been doing so far. I'm always looking for where an area should be darker and trying to blend that in. And then blending a little bit of raw umber into some of that sepia again, just to help create a little bit of like a beigey I like to also use circular motions just to help smooth everything into the surface. You can see where we're going to have a darker area here, a lighter area here, and then a darker area again through here. So again, it's just building up that colour sort of quite slowly and methodically. Using a light pressure with the sepia. So, let me just move, let's move you that way. As we come towards the edge here, I'm just going to lighten my pressure even more, still using a little bit of the sepia 50%, but because I've put down quite a lot of the raw umber 10%, this sort of just goes on really, really smoothly. And I'm just going to blend out the top part with a little bit of the cold grey. So I do like to try and stick with this sort of one pencil for the most part, and then I can kind of just adjust and just darken areas up as I need to. And then through here we've got quite a lot of like a bluey kind of tone, so again just going to take a little bit of the Payne's Grey 30 and just glazing it over, so using a light pressure and just running it over just to help tint the paper to be more of that sort of blue tone. And then again, we are going to use some of the dark sepia from the Polychromos, gently and lightly at first, just to begin to just create some of the shapes on the bark. So again, not kind of trying to save my voice here, so I do apologise for being a bit quiet. But yeah, I'm just continuing just to add in little bits of detail. I think I'm going to take a little bit of the nugget, sort of like a browny beige, just to tone and put a little bit more sort of colour through those lighter, sort of warmer areas. And then over the top of that, using some of the burnt umber That's probably all I'm going to need to do for that part. And then just adding some more of the sepia, like 50%, to these more purpley toned areas. And again, we've still got a little bit of scope to add, you know, a darker area. Well, you know, to go in with a darker colour to really sort of emphasise some of these shadows. So, for example, using the dark sepia through, again, just some of those darkest areas. And then some of the Payne's Grey from the polychromos as well. Again, just in those more cool areas to add a little bit more depth. And then I'm also just going to take some black pencil . And just really go over some of these darkest areas. And that's because, again, just to add a little bit more depth, which is going to help just make everything look a lot more realistic. It's that contrast that's so important. Just smoothing out some of that those highlighted areas. And again, we are gonna just take the warm grey through that warmer toned area, and I'm not removing the graphite at the bottom because we will go over it with some other colours. And then I'm going to take the cold grey and just work this through as a base as well. But I will be removing the graphite on the top section up here because I don't want it to be showing through, so it's a really light area. And then again, just taking some of that warm grey, and then just removing any lighter areas. Now there's almost like a little bit of like lift on the top part of the bark here, but I think I might just incorporate that as part of the tree. So again, just using a light pressure. And then a little bit of the cool cold grey. So just, you know, trying to blend everything into the paper a little bit. And that's sort of like the base. And then we're going to start taking some of the sepia at 10%, and again just working this into any areas that got a more sort of purpley tone, but just remembering this is our lightest pencil. So we can go in with a lot more colour and depth. So this is almost just to mark out where the dark areas are going to go. And again, just any of those sort of more bluey toned areas, just taking a little bit of the cold grey, the Payne's grey, 30%. And just putting that in and blending it out. And you can also use it as a bit of a glaze over some of the other parts of the bark. Okay, so I'm gonna take the sepia 50%, and again just start putting this in some of those shadowy areas. So I'm using the sepia 50 just to help create a little bit of depth. So following exactly the same sort of procedure as what I did over here, we're just beginning to layer up, and I'm going to take just a little bit of the nugget. I know, to be honest, this area on this lighter part of the branch is a little bit more pinky, but to be honest, you know, it's not, as long as we get the depth in, I'm not really too fussed about getting the colour 100% accurate for the bark. I think it will kind of complement the piece better just by sort of keeping it with the colours that are already there. So I'm using a little bit of the raw, the burnt umber as well, and obviously I'll be going over it all with some of the burnt umber. Some of the sepia 50%, which will just help tone it down again. And again, just putting a little bit of the sepia 50. Just into those darker shadows. Just as a sort of like a mid-tone, because obviously we're going to build on this. And then we're just using a light glaze, some burnt umber. And again, beginning to go and look at using a little bit of the darkest sepia. You could even add maybe a little bit of the burnt ochre from the luminance just in those sort of more peachy toned areas, but I'm only adding this as a glaze over the top where I put a little bit of that burnt umber. Just to help smooth it all down again. And you could also use a little bit of the dark flesh from the illuminance, should you want to really go in and add a tiny bit of that sort of more peachy, darker tone. But again, it's not sort of crucial. We could just get away with not putting this in, to be honest. And then lastly, to come up and just lightly put in some of that sepia, 50%. Okay, so one of the last, obviously we need to do this first, but one of the last things that we're going to do is obviously add more depth. So I'm going to start off by taking the sepia, the dark sepia from the polychromos, because it's about time we started adding a little bit of that final detail. Got my hair in my face. So yeah, just drawing in some of the shapes that we can see. So just tracing almost around the outside of where some of those darker areas are. Okay, and I'm also just going to use a little bit of the burnt sienna just to add a little bit more depth. just a tiny bit. And a little bit of the Payne's Grey from the Polychromos, just again to add a little bit of that more detail. And then taking black from the Polychromos and just adding some real sort of deeper details. Okay, so that's sort of like the amount of depth I think I'm gonna add. I'll just maybe add a little bit more nugget at the bottom here. And then going on to the foot, in fact, very quickly, I will just add a little bit of the Payne's Grey, 30%, just to help smooth out. And you can also maybe add a little bit of the white as well, just to, again, just help, just lighten it. And then if you do that, what I would recommend is just going over those darker areas and just really sort of just pulling out that detail. Sometimes when we smooth everything down, it can just sort of look a little bit lost again, so we just need to pull out a few details if we do that, like so. And that's probably going to be enough. Okay, so going on to this last I just went a little bit overboard there. Didn't mean to do that. Oh well. There we go. Yeah, going on to this last sort of bit. I think I'm gonna use the apricot from the Pablos, and again, not going over that top graphite line there. Removing that, and then using a little bit of the light flash as well, smoothing it all into the surface a little bit, and then using the orange glaze and just mapping out. Obviously this looks very bright at the moment, but in a minute when we sort of tone it down again. So a little bit of the orange glaze, and then we're going to take a little bit of the terracotta from the luminance, and you can see underneath the sort of the bird here and in between the branches, almost like that darker reddy kind of tone. So we need to try and put that in. And then I'm going to use just a really light pressure and some of the Payne's Grey from the polychromos, just to give an indication of where like the claws are, and then just going over the top a little bit of the cold grey one, and then just like we did over here, just emphasising a little bit of that shadow underneath with some of the sepia, the darker sepia. But honestly, like, it was because it was closest to hand. You could use you know, 50% as well. So I'm just emphasising some of that shadow. And then again, I'm going to just take a little bit of the burnt sienna. And then a little bit of the apricot again, going over those light areas. Then just blending them all together, light pressure and some of that orange glaze. Just emphasising those little claws with a bit of cold grey one, and then just taking the dark sepia, sorry that's not dark sepia, that's black, but to be honest I can use black at this point, and just going over the shadows. And then all we want to do is just blend this up a little bit. So I'm going to use the terracotta from the luminance, just to help blend. And then a little bit of chestnut from the Pablos, again, just because it's a slightly darker colour, reddy tone. And a little bit of apricot circle emotions, just to blend everything together again. And I'm going to do exactly the same on this one, so just gently going from that darker shadowy side, just flicking pencil movements up just to blend it out a little bit. Then taking the black circular motions and just emphasising that shadow underneath. I'm going to zoom you out and then we'll see how it's looking. I think we're pretty much there. The only thing I would do is probably just take a little bit of this top line off the foot, and then taking the light flesh and just blending it together a little bit more, so it doesn't look like there's that harsh line. There we go, that's pretty much it. Right, and here we have our little Kingfisher. I have just cleaning the paper, but I have absolutely loved this. I'm so sorry that I'm a little bit unwell for the last part of this. Obviously it wasn't intentional. Yeah, so I really hope you've enjoyed this one. I know it's been a little bit complicated, it's been a lot of different colours, it's been a lot of different techniques, but I honestly can't wait to see your versions of this. If you've got any questions, you need any advice, then you know where to find me, either on Patreon or via email or my website or social media, anything at all. I'm here to help you in any way that I can. I know this will be going live in a few days, which will be before Christmas, so if you have watched this before Christmas, then I wish you the happiest of Christmases, and if you're watching this in the future, then thank you so much for being here. As I said, really hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been so much fun. It's been super challenging, but I really love how it's turned out. Really love the amount of depth we've been able to get on both the bark and on the bird himself. So yeah, really love this so much. And I know I get a lot of questions whether you can sell your versions of my prints. Absolutely, you are more than entitled to. This is, I always say, I just teach. You are the creators of your beautiful work. I just help you along the way, so it is yours to do as you wish. But yeah, I will hopefully see you very soon. Take care and lots of love. Bye.